So let me start with my first question. What is place-based education? So as the name suggests, and you have seen great example of place-based education already. So as the name suggests, place-based education is an instructional model that relies on the resources available in students' local communities as well as the specific problems and issues confronted by those communities as a way to get students involved in the learning process. We could say place-based education is basically a radical form of contextualized education, or what is also called situated learning. And as such, it emphatically opposes the decontextualized educational models that have been traditionally promoted or adopted by schools and teachers across the globe. To better understand what place-based education proponents mean by this, by contextualized education as something somehow opposed to decontextualized education, I will give you an example of decontextualized education that should help understand what they mean when they make this distinction. First, think of the first time you, your students, or your children were introduced to the solar system. It is very common to do that in first or second grade. My son is currently finishing first grade and is already able to repeat in order, depending on how close or far they are from the sun, the name of each planet. Now, as much as I like to believe my son is a genius, and that's why he can repeat this information better than I do, I have to admit that probably the fact that he can recite the names of the planets more fluently than me is saying more about how useful, or not useful at all, it's been for me to remember that information as an adult than what is saying about the capacity of a 6 or 7-year-old to memorize a certain amount of information. Now, the real irony, first place education proponents see us in an example like this one I just explained, is that probably that same first grader, first or second grader who can recite in order the names of the planet, will not be able to identify a single star or constellation that he could see in the sky at night. He has probably also memorized his home address, as he's able to repeat if he's put in the situation to do so. But that doesn't mean that he will be able to find his way home if he has to do that when standing just a few blocks from where he lives. So that's the contradiction. That's one of the main paradoxes place-based education proponents have been trying to address during the last 20 years or so. That lack of knowledge about the local community we find in students, coupled with a questionable or developmentally inappropriate knowledge of distant or abstract content. One of the main goals of place-based education is to try to solve that problem by teaching students about their local communities, by creating them a sense of place. And that's one of the main concepts associated with place-based education. They need to help the students to create a sense of place, a sense of community, before they learn more abstract content, before they learn about distant planets. And as Sirocco and Tanisha were saying earlier, we saw how many of these kids in high school, they haven't been to a Brave Stadium, or they haven't been to the Coca-Cola World, not despite the fact of being here in the city of Atlanta. But other principles that are also included in this educational model, and you should be able to see how this closely relates to what other presenters have said before, are, for instance, the emphasis on learning through interactions and interventions in local communities. So the local community should be the point of reference to introduce students to any subject from the perspective of place-based education. And in some of the presentation we heard before, we can see how this idea has been applied. Another principle is to teach students the importance of understanding local limits and learning how to live within our means at a local and global level. And this is something that also defines this paradigm. The central focus place-based educators put on sustainability, in the idea of an education for sustainability or an environmental education. And in fact, one of the most common projects that place-based educators like to do with their students is the creation of school gardens. So another goal of place-based education has been to redirect the attention toward rural and small communities whose specific traditions and developmental problems are usually ignored by classic pedagogies. From the perspective of place-based educators, they tend to believe that in the traditional curriculum there is too much emphasis on city living at the expense of teaching students about their natural environment, or at the expense of learning local traditions that are relevant to specific communities in rural areas. No? And obviously, this is an idea that has merit, but now my personal criticism of place-based educators in regard to this idea is that they end up usually doing the opposite. They put all the emphasis on the natural environment and show a certain disregard toward urban spaces, which, as we have shown today, and as we're trying to convince you to believe today, can also be a great resource for experiential learning. So finally, another principle of place-based education is the idea of putting the emphasis on hands-on, on real-world learning experiences. So the idea that students learn better by following an inquiry-based and task-based model than when they just listen to lectures delivered by their teachers on a daily basis. So that's basically what place-based education is about. And I hope we can probably see how some of these ideas resonate in some of what has been said today so far. So now, during the second part of my presentation, I want to propose a new approach to place-based education that relies